will be starting real soon. I know we are currently live, just waiting for a couple people to show up so that way I at least have someone to talk to. So, stay tuned. All right, hello everybody, and we are live. Welcome, good evening. I hope all of you have had a great week so far as we are rolling into the weekend. And I want to first say hello to Janine, to Teresa, the Greater Bilby, and also Jeff. I'm glad to see all of you here and for this weekly Freedom Friday. And as all of you know from the announcement, we will be discussing the power of choice. And there are definitely reasons for that. In the meantime, I also want to thank my fellow patrons who have supported me through Patreon. They do that out of the kindness of their own hearts, knowing that I'm going to be putting that money to good use and not for personal gain. So I want to thank my fellow people, including Lisa C., the Hope Foundation, and Margaret M. for their contributions. And so to start off, why the discussion of the power of choice? Well, that's quite simple, really. What does that have to do, first of all, with freedom? And I think it's simple to say that we actually have the freedom in this country, the United States, to even make choices of our own. And not every country has the privilege of such thing. You look at places such as Venezuela, they don't have the choice of, or the luxury of making that choice of going to the store and purchasing however much groceries they need for the week. They have to stand in line just in order to get bread. In many cases, they have to stand in line for days on end just to get a loaf of bread. And so we having the blessed opportunity to make our own choices is one that should not be diminished. And that's why I think it's important that we be able to really think about that. And unfortunately, it looks like my document that I took the opportunity to prepare has been erred greatly. And that's really unfortunate. That means that I'm going to have to kind of wing it a little bit, but that's okay because I just won't be able to use quotes. I want to say hello to fellow Summer as well, and Johnny from Jeep Things Outdoors. So, anyway, I also have an announcement. I'll probably make it again later, since I imagine that I'll have a few more people viewing this live stream later on as well. And that announcement has to do with a request that seems to have been one that, I've been asked by several people. I don't know if I want to say multiple, maybe even several is not the proper word, but at least a few people have asked me about this. And it's my opinion on things Christianity. Now, I don't try to bring religion or politics into my YouTube channel, but since it's been asked enough times, I thought I would actually take more into the light of consideration. in particular, and I'm hoping I can bring up this. The comment is not here anymore, but I did save a screenshot of it at some point, and unfortunately I can't find that either because I'm not quite as well prepared as I was hoping to be. But basically, the person asked me in a comment, and it might not show up just because I've put that as a private because it's no longer relevant to the channel because Freedom Friday for last week is over. But asking my opinion on or what I think about Christianity or what Christianity even is in general, the benefits as well as the drawbacks. And so I want to, at least I thought maybe it's a good opportunity to start something that I think I've been kind of being nudged in this direction by the Holy Spirit to talk about a Salvation Saturday. And I chose Saturday not because Saturday is the Sabbath, because I believe, and it's not because I do or don't believe that we have to observe the Sabbath anymore. I actually don't believe we have to anymore, but perhaps we can go into that sort of discussion on a Salvation Saturday, but simply because Sunday is when churchgoers traditionally go to church. And so, Saturday is a nice winding down for the weekend. It might be just a good day to discuss that sort of thing. So tomorrow I want to do a Salvation Saturday where, and this is, by the way, a choice that I can make in this free nation. And so that's also kind of interesting to go along those lines. So tomorrow I'm thinking probably around 5:30 because it's not too late on a Saturday for many people. It might be a little early for some people, but it's typically for probably my average viewer to already be out or done with their dinner for the evening and whatnot, and ready to wind down for the rest of the night. So we'll be talking about my view of Christianity, I guess you could say. What I think Christianity is. And, I guess the exact quote would be, what is Christianity to me? So we'll be going into that and possibly even a few other things involved there. So, going back to live chat here, because I've been kind of talking and browsing the web, trying to catch up a little bit. Janine says, I would love that. Speaking of Salvation Friday. And I want to thank Johnny for reminding people to hit the thumbs up button. The Greater Bilby says, I feel you have a calling, Garrett. And you might be right. Or perhaps not. Maybe this is just a way for me to make a fool of myself. You never know. I'm considering the fact that my document that I wrote up all nice and organized is now just a bunch of coded numbers and letters and weird things that I can't even read. I'm making a fairly decent fool of myself right now, but it just comes natural to me. I'm very talented in that respect. If I can make it a career, I might actually make a six-figure income. But nevertheless, I want to pull up a piece of scripture, and I guess you could say that it's kind of a preview of what Salvation Saturday could eventually look like. But I'm not doing it for that purpose in particular, but because I think it's a good, strong starting point for this discussion of the power of choice. And thankfully, I think I remember which scripture I wanted to pull up. Yes. So I'm going to read what it says. It's in Romans chapter 8, verses 20 through 22, and then I will kind of paraphrase a translation, at least how I understand it to mean. So it goes something like this. I understand that not everybody's going to be Christian, and that's fine. I'm not using it for the purpose of that because I don't expect everybody to be a Christian. Naturally, everybody has the choice on whether they want to be whichever belief system or worldview that they choose. But Romans 8:20 through 22 says, "For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now." So what does this mean exactly? Well, let's look at this from a 21st century perspective. My last study of astronomy, well, not the last one, but the last one in this particular topic of the universe, is that science has been able to guesstimate, I don't know how accurate this is, but that the universe spans over 14.5 billion light years. That's as far as they've been able to somehow mysteriously measure it. Now, Paul was talking about the matter of the sin of man, the fall of man caused by sin. And what Paul is basically saying is that all of creation, which means everything that God created in this realm of creation, 14.5 billion light years of known expansion of the universe, has been affected by sin. Put that another way, every choice that we make has a consequence, whether positive or negative. And in some way, mysterious as it may be, our choices affect things that occur 14.5 billion light years away from where we stand. Now, that may seem somewhat unbelievable in a certain sense. Now, trying to reason with that, like how can something like that actually be true? Because if you actually were to take the Milky Way galaxy and just a picture of it, shrink it down to where you can actually see the entire thing, and you take our solar system alone, and you were to erase it from that picture, you would not see a change at all. Not even a bleep. So how can we, as human beings, making whatever mistakes, making whatever positive changes that we make, how can we, as this little blip, this little grain of sand in the Sahara Desert, make any sort of change to something that may occur, or make some sort of decision that can make a potential change in something else 14.5 billion light years away? I have no idea. That is where the mystery lies. But it doesn't change the fact that some sort of concept, it's obviously something that went through Paul's mind, or maybe it was something that was spiritually led to him. This realization, this revelation, if you will. And if taking things to the end point like that tells me, by my own observation of things alone, that perhaps, at least I can speak for myself, I don't put nearly as much consideration into the choices that I make on a regular basis. Because every decision that we make, again, has consequences, many of which we may not even realize. But to come to the realization that my own decisions, and perhaps the universe is even wider than 14.5 billion light years, I have no idea. I don't even know if you can measure the speed of light in space going over 600,000 miles per hour, much like you can here on Earth. I don't know how they came to that, but that supposedly is the speed of light, going 600,000 miles per hour, and or 600,000 miles per second. I can't remember. It's one of the two. And it be that way in space because there's no friction in space, because space is a vacuum, and therefore, once an object is given some sort of push, it can go that same speed that it was pushed at until there's some sort of thing to resist it. And if light travels at that speed, who's to say that that speed does not double every single second that it continues to move at its current projectile direction? So the speed of light may be drastically different than we know now. Perhaps the universe is not nearly as large as it's measured out to be. But nevertheless, 14.5 billion light years, if it is true, that means that our decisions are a lot more important than perhaps we take into mind as we make them. And that's why I think the power of choice is so important to talk about, especially when we have the freedom to make such decisions. If you're just joining us, we are talking about the power of choice and the fact that we have the freedom to do so. Let's go back to the live chat here. And Follow Summer says, love this talk. I am glad to hear that. And let's see here, going up here. Janine apparently is making an exceptional fool, or is exceptional at making a fool of herself. I'm glad I'm not the only one. And hello, Nina. Thank you for joining in on the chat. And if I haven't said hello to you, I want to say hello to you now, all of you who are joining. Let's see. And hello, Sam and Michelle, for joining in on the chat. So, how can we know that what Paul said, that our decisions, our actions, our sin, perhaps even our generosity, have an effect on things that exist 14.5 billion light years away? And what does it mean to have an effect on something that's that far away, or even closer? Something that we certainly cannot reach, even by our own technology thus far. I mean, perhaps, I may have told someone off, and that may have been the one thing that caused the planet to go out of its orbit. Who knows? Maybe that's why there's a Planet X out there that they claim that's there, that we can't see nor detect, but it's there anyway, because science tells us so. And perhaps that's why I should take things into consideration more when I make decisions. But how do I know that's true? That our decisions can play such a role? And I think we can test that by looking at local situations. It's certainly something to just consider by itself. But let's bring one thing into consideration. Now, all of you know I don't like to bring religion or politics into this. And this is going to sound political, simply because our culture in the U.S. here has become so politicized. But I assure you that this is a discussion, this particular topic here, based on observation and personal opinion. And also stating facts. It has nothing to do with left wing, right wing, middle ground, whatever. Because honestly, it's not about that at all. So I'm sure many of you can remember a beautiful young lady by the name of Kate Steinle. She was 29 when she was murdered by an illegal immigrant back in 2015 in San Francisco. Well, apparently, more recently, keep in mind that this case did not even go to trial for over 2 years, and it was dismissed because this murder was not a crime. There are many details that go into this, but I think much of it has to do with one particular issue. Now, there are many choices that go involved in this issue, But as you know, San Francisco, much like the entire state of Washington, unfortunately, thanks to our governor, Jay Inslee, which we will not go into my opinion on that. But San Francisco is a safe city. Now, what really is a safe city? It was a safe city long ago, before it was all politicized to the point that it is now. Of course, being a safe city is all about a political agenda. But not to go into that, a safe city was basically where if an illegal immigrant was being pulled over by a policeman or whatever have you, maybe it's just for having a taillight out while driving, they were not allowed to ask if they have legal residence. That's what qualified a safe city. It has now turned into something a lot more disturbing, to say the least. Let's say, for example, a legal resident of Washington, born and raised, we'll call him Bob. And he gets pulled over he gets arrested for smuggling cocaine. All right? And he gets prosecuted, he gets trialed and all that. He has to spend the next 10 years in prison. Then we have Jim. He's not a legal resident. In fact, he illegally migrated from, your city of choice. He's a minority. Well, I don't even like to use the term minority because I think it belittles people. But let's just say Jim is, whatever race of choice, but he's not white. As if race is really a thing. And it's not. But we will go into that later. He gets arrested for the same crime. And for smuggling cocaine. Well, it turns out that he is also on a wanted list by our I can't remember the name of the immigration police. Anyway, so finds out. So actually, the cop has to let him go, because that's now law in places like Seattle, in California, in San Francisco, places like that. That's what a safe city is now. Can I be wrong about that? I can, absolutely. But that is from what law enforcement I've been able to talk to about that. And so I'm going to go by their credibility on that. Anyway, so San Francisco being a safe city, I didn't lose my place, I promise. San Francisco being a safe city knew that this particular gentleman, well, not much of a gentleman, but this man, had been deported 5 different times before this particular murder with Kate Steinle. And had to wait 2 years for this whole thing to process through. Keeping in mind, he was deported 5 times. And I think there were actually, I think there were other charges involved. I didn't look much into this particular profile, but, drug smuggling and stuff like that. But he was deported 5 times. And was not charged with any sort of crime. Now, does San Francisco being a safe city have anything to do with that? I cannot say for absolute certainty. But given the evidence, I mean, it's proved that he was the one who fired the gun, and it was the thing that killed Kate Steinle. Yet, it wasn't a crime. Absolutely disgraceful. And that was a recent trial, too, keep in mind. But it's the idea of choosing to be a safe city that can cause things like this. How common of a thing is this with illegal immigrants? Is it even 1%? Probably not. But it's the fact that if he was not there, if he was actually deported and was not able to come back to the United States, and if San Francisco was not a safe city, Kate would probably be alive today. Choices like that costed a life. Let's go back to the live chat here because I have not been watching it. I need to scroll up apparently because I've lost my place in the chat. Oh, that's what happened. That's why I lost my place. Jeep Thing says, unfortunately I have to go, but we'll watch later. Night, everyone. Good night, Johnny. I appreciate it. You even showing up, and I appreciate you watching this later. Janine says, it is the fact that matter goes from stable to chaotic, and sin is the cause. And that's definitely a part of it. There's no question about it. And in order to really explain my thought process on that, it would take a lot longer than just the hour that I have. So and Nana says, so horrible. I completely agree. And hello, Rick from Cebu. I appreciate you showing up. This is quite late for you, I think, or is it really early? I can never quite remember. I know that there's a big time difference, though. Let's look at a less negative issue, because I don't want this to just be a negative topic or negative consequence. Although this isn't exactly a positive consequence either. Jenny Durkan is the new mayor of Seattle. And I know this is all local. At least this one's local because this is one that's, for one thing, Jenny Durkan is a brand new mayor as of Wednesday of this week. And it's something that I find important because if we make choices based on ideology, not on what is better for a common man, but what's based on ideology, because I go left wing, I go right wing, I go this, I vote only Republican because that's how my family votes, which by the way they don't. But if I only do that because that's what my family does, and I don't look at the actual facts of the matter, I'm going to get myself into a world of hurt. At least that's based on my own observation and my own life experience. But Jenny Durkan is the new mayor of Seattle. She's overqualified, and I won't give reasons because I don't want to offend people, but I'm kind of being sarcastic when I say that. She has, in her first day, she made a pledge for renters vouchers in order to be able to afford to live in Seattle, because if a one-bedroom apartment can cost upwards of $2,200 a month, if not more, especially in the heart of Seattle. She's also made a pledge or a vow to, whatever you want to call it, pledge vow for free community college and technical college for students that are getting out of high school and all that. And I think there's a certain amount of generosity. I mean, I think there's a lot of goodwill involved. I think she's doing this at least in part. Perhaps she's a much better person than I am. I know that most people are. So perhaps she's one of them. And maybe she's just doing this out of the goodness of her heart to show compassion, especially for those who are less fortunate to have the funds to be able to afford college or the credit to be able to afford to obtain the financial the financials that necessary, the student loans and whatnot, student aid, if that's what you want to call it, with the high, like 26% interest, whatever it is. But perhaps she's showing compassion for those who are less fortunate. I don't even know if that's necessarily the case, or even the right wordage. Because statistics show that only 31% of people who graduate from high school in Seattle actually move on to further their academic education. Now, first of all, I would want to say that, well, not every field, not every career field requires such an education. Quite frankly, the way that I see it, if I can flawlessly perform a a surgery, like some sort of removal of a cancer tumor in the brain of someone, without a surgical degree, a doctoral degree or whatever, and I can do the same procedure just as well as any professional brain surgeon, should I really require a degree in order to do it? I don't think so. But it is a degree that considers us as qualified. But what happens? What is a consequence that happens when degrees are earned by more and more people because it is more easily obtainable? It certainly does not, in the long run, qualify everyone for extremely high, well-paid jobs in the six figures. Definitely not the case. What it does is it makes a degree less valuable. Not invaluable, but less valuable. And the reason why I bring this up is because Secretary of Education of the Education Department, Secretary Betsy DeVos, opinion about her personally aside, I don't have any bad opinions of her, but I know a lot of people do. Certainly the teachers union does. But we won't go into that. Betsy DeVos is well known for her pushing the agenda, well, and I don't know if you want to call it an agenda, but her pushing for having more options in the K through 12 arena. It's appalling to many people. I don't know if I want to classify them in a particular group, because I don't like to divide people that way. We're all, creations of God in His likeness and in His image. We're all human beings. Putting things in a certain class is unnecessary. But it would be appalling to, a certain number of people at the very least, to have 12-year-olds in some sort of career training where they get to, still get their education. Of course, a crane operator does not need to know history. I mean, I think it's important to know history, but not the history of, like something that happened in China 200 years ago, or whatever, having to go to shop class or whatever. I don't even remember what I learned in high school. That's just how much I cared back then. I kind of wish I did back then as much as I do now. So that's making a fool of myself. But, to have some sort of trade school is something that Betsy DeVos has more recently talked about. Having even like a 12-year-old be able to learn how to, do framing work for new buildings. Imagine a 12-year-old learning how to actually build, how to frame walls of a house, and actually earn a little bit of money for doing it, and also continuing in their education. So by the time they graduate from high school, they can already have 6 years of experience doing framing work. Who in their right mind would not want that opportunity for their child? And you know what? It wouldn't have to cost us any tax money to get this done. The company can hire them with the contention of them keeping up their grades. That would obviously be part of it, because I remember when I was 12 years old, and it's one of the few things I remember, and I only remembered it fairly recently actually. I think it was actually studying on this particular topic that that flashback came to mind. But when I was 12 years old, I was hired by my neighbor to break down, remove slabs from his backyard, and framing out his new patio, and actually installing new tile slabs. And and I was getting paid like $5 an hour to do it. Of course, back then I think a job would have paid $20 an hour to do it, but I was making money on the side because I was not legally old enough to do some sort of thing like do courtesy clerk work at Safeway or something like that. So I think it's an important opportunity. I think it's a great opportunity for children to be able to join some sort of trade school, because I'm sure you remember back when you were a kid, you already had a general idea of what you would like to try to be when you grew up. Some people might have said an astronaut or whatnot, and maybe there is a trade school for that sort of thing. Maybe there could be, at least. And who knows? The opportunities are practically endless. And yet it's something that can be profitable for schools as well. If you're just joining us, we're talking about power of choice and how that relates to freedom. On this Freedom Friday, I welcome all of you, and I thank all of you for participating, not only in just watching this live stream, but also in the live chat. And with that, we will go back to the live chat here. I want to say hello to Martha. So thank you for joining in. And if I have not said hi to you, maybe it's because I missed your chat comment. Because, as you know, it's not always easy to walk and chew bubblegum at the same time, or also known as talk and read at the same time, because, well, I'm just not nearly as capable as many people in that regard. But going back to live chat here, let's see here. Jeff says, good show. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see. Apparently, it's 1 p.m., actually, like probably 1:11 or 1:41, something like that in Brisbane. Now, I don't know when that was actually sent. Janine says, I agree 100%. Great show. Keep going. This is the best. Well, thank you. And considering my track record so far, this that's a milestone. I went from great to the best. Let's see. Rick said, flew out of Dallas when I came here to Cebu. That was just 2 years ago. Wow, that's quite a culture change, if you will. Let's see. Michelle says, to encourage more Seattle high school kids to graduate, many drop out. That's that's another thing too. And thank you, Michelle. I appreciate you mentioning that, because it reminds me of something that was in my notes that I cannot use because they are all just coded in gibberish at this point. But what's another consequence of having your education being free, if you will? Of course, we all know that it doesn't really become free, because what it really does is it takes the opportunity to live someplace in like Seattle. It takes that roof and it raises it by lowering the floor. What I mean by that is that us taxpayers will have to pay for it. And even if living in a city, which is south of Seattle or north of Seattle, wherever I choose to park for the night, even if I were to vote no, if Seattle votes yes, then everybody in the King County would have to oblige, because that's just how King County works. I don't know why. There's no need for it, but that's just how it's done. And that's the way it's done even with a choo-choo train project, which Washington State or Washington Department of Transportation has decided to go $500 million over budget on, and yet have not laid one track down on, and yet they still want another $1 billion, and that's going to come out of our wallets as well, especially if you're a property owner. Thankfully, my property moves. But enough with that. One other consequence as well, and this all has to do with making one decision to make college education free. Amazing. It's almost making the statement that Paul mentioned in Romans 8 more legitimate, doesn't it? It's very interesting. One other consequence of this one decision is, and this is based on observation, possibly even fact, when something is free, it becomes less appreciated. Not just less valuable, but less appreciated. I have had friends in their high school days that have been given their vehicles for free by their parents. I had to pay for my first vehicle. Thankfully, I worked as soon as I got a job as soon as I was legally able to, so I could save up for that car. But I've had friends who were given their vehicles, and they treated them terribly because they didn't have to pay for it. And that goes along with, many other things. I will admit that I've been given a gift card to a store or whatever, and I may have purchased something that I would have otherwise never purchased because I didn't have to pay for it, essentially. It wasn't my money. And if only I would have had the mindset that I do now, I may have made a different decision. Of course, I can't change that now, but I can certainly admit to it. And I don't even think I own some of those things anymore. I certainly didn't take care of them as well as I would have if I used my own money. Certainly, when I purchase a $1,200 guitar, I'm going to treat it much better than I would have if it was a $50 guitar that someone gave to me. And by the way, I don't think I ever paid $1,200 for a guitar, but that's irrelevant. It's something that I probably would do if I were to buy a guitar again, which I probably won't for a very long time. But again, if something is given, if it's something sentimental, perhaps it's different. If a child gives a parent some card that they hand drew themselves, that's something that's far more cherished, I think. But that's got a value on it. That's something that's already been previously invested. Keep in mind, children are investments as well. It's investments in the continuation of a family name, investments in the prosperity of this great country, America, which was originally designed to be the forefront of potential for the rest of this great world. It was to be an example of what freedom really looks like. Unfortunately, it does not seem to be leading that direction, but I think Trump might be onto something on that. Like him or not, President Trump has been doing some really good things. I may not like his personality at all times, but I appreciate the fact that he wants to do things that benefit America and potentially the rest of the world, rather than simply do things based on ideology. Which, by the way, speaking of which, did you know that Obama, prior President Obama, said in a recent statement, in one of his very rare occurrences that he actually shows his face, that he has a hard time dealing with people who do not believe the polar ice caps are melting. Mr. Obama. May I call you Mr. Obama? Or maybe I should just call you Barack, because the likelihood is you're never going to see this video. But, Mr. Obama, did you know that in 2012 and between the 2012 and 2013, NASA reported that the polar ice caps actually increased 533 million square miles? Was that or maybe it was 533,000. Either way, it's a lot. Did you know that? And yet, global warming is still a thing. Okay. Well, I guess you and I will never have to converse. But if you ever decide that you want to, I'm more than happy to, because I'm sure you're a really nice guy. Certainly, much better person than I am, despite whatever faults you have, because mine are far worse. Nevertheless, I just find it interesting. Going back to the live chat here, and if you're just joining us, we are discussing the power of choice and how that relates to freedom. I want to say hello to JJ Willow. I appreciate you joining in on the live chat. Martha says, my father put up half the cost of 2 of my cars, but the insurance was all my problem since Dad stopped driving when he came home from World War II. Martha, I want to thank your father, whether he is still breathing or not. I want to thank him for his service, because it is people like him that continue our recognized God-given rights. So I want to thank him. Rick says, global warming? Just a political ploy to get more hard-earned money from us taxpayers. Amen. And all based on stuff that we exhale, called carbon dioxide. Yet, I find it so interesting that this decision, this choice to follow such a ploy, is all based on something that we exhale. It's based on, even though we can't predict the weather, a week out, we try to, but we can't. Yet we can make models that will predict how our very Earth will be landscaped 100 years from now. Can't predict a week from now, but we can predict 100 years from now. There seems to be a gap here somewhere. I'm not sure how it works, but I do know that I could build a model. Whether it's true or not, I can build one, and then I can come up with a whole hypothesis based on that one model. And then I can build another one and say, this is what things are going to look like, because I see that even if my statistics are incorrect, I know what the statistics are now, and so I can base a future model based on that. Because global warming was an issue 100 years ago, so naturally we know the history from 100 years ago. By the way, it was not. Just saying. I want to say hello to Jacqueline. So thank you for joining in on the live chat. And I really appreciate all of you, because I understand the numbers. If without all of you, I'm not talking to anybody. And then it makes this whole fun Freedom Friday thing nil and void. So I appreciate all of you for joining in. We're coming to a close here pretty soon, because I do have a meeting at 7:30, and I already know I'm going to be late to it, but that's okay, because this is an important topic. All of them are really important, actually, because freedom is the very basis on why this country was founded. And give me just a second here. I may be feeling better, but one of the drawbacks of having a cold is the cough seems to linger on for me another 2 months afterward. But again, the opening up to this conversation, I made an announcement that I want to start something called Salvation Saturday, at least give it a trial run, because I've been asked on more than one occasion, I'll say that, with some form of safety and assurance that I'm not being dishonest, because that's the last thing I want to be, to give my thoughts on what Christianity is to me, to give that to all of you, since many of you are Christians and recognize that I was a Christian without ever mentioning that I was. which thank you. That's quite a compliment. So I will be doing that. But in order to do that, we have to talk about what Christianity really is. And so we'll do that tomorrow, probably about 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, which is 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. And whatever time it is in Cebu for Rick, or the Greater Bilby, whatever time that is in Australia. Is that right? I could be wrong. But that would be the whole, that was the announcement for that little teaser, is to have a Salvation Saturday. If it works out really well, maybe we'll continue it. You never know. There's a lot of things that can be discussed from a biblical perspective and how that relates to today. And the reason why I mention that again is because the very central basis of this whole topic of power of choice and how it relates to freedom in this greatest nation on God's green earth is Romans 8:20 through 22. And how, to paraphrase, although I read it earlier, is that Paul is basically saying that all of creation, all of this 14.5 billion light years of this universe that we call the realm of creation, is affected by every choice that we make in some mysterious way, however great or little that effect may be. And how much it's really important, although perhaps we don't always, and I know I'm guilty of it for sure, probably more than any of you, of how much it is necessary to really consider how important every decision that we make really is. Because every decision we make has consequences, and all consequences have other reactions as well. Because you know the old saying, with every reaction there is an equal but opposite reaction. And with that, I would like to conclude. So again, thank you everybody for joining in tonight. Words cannot express how greatly I appreciate each and every one of you. This is one of the things that makes Friday so great for me. Not only is it the start of my weekend, but it's also an opportunity to communicate and directly interact with each and every one of you. So thank you again for joining in tonight. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for watching. Take care. Love others as you love yourself. And I'll see you hopefully tomorrow. Until then, be careful, be safe, and be kind. See you tomorrow.